So as you see in the bulletin, the theme for this week's message and our thoughts together is persistence. And like any good student, when I went to start writing and gathering my thoughts about persistence, I began in the dictionary. It was an online dictionary, but nonetheless a dictionary. And I typed in the word persistence and waited for it to tell me this wonderful thing that would be a great starting point for my sermon. And it told me that persistence was the act of persisting. I think they wanted me to stick with it. I was always under the impression that it was a no-no to define a word with the word. It doesn't seem particularly helpful to me. So I had to keep looking and thinking a bit about persistence. And so I went to my next best source, and I sat at the kitchen table one day with Pat. And I said to him, "What do you think about persistence?" And we started talking a little bit about some of the ideas. And as he often does, he went straight to the heart of the question, which really had been puzzling me. And he says, "Well, do you mean the characteristic of persistence or the actual process of persisting?" And I just kind of looked at him, said, "Thank you very much," and went back to my computer. No, I didn't. We talked a little bit more about it because really that helped me realize why I was struggling. I had one of these sermons that was all over the place, and I couldn't figure out how to rein it in. And that question helped me because really when you think about the quality of persistence, it's almost a two-part or an interrelated idea where you have this focused determination. That's what I'm going to call it. I'm not going to call it persisting. Focused determination, which is sort of an internal quality that we have, or perhaps we don't have, but it's something that we apply toward a goal or an end. We are persisting usually toward something. There's the purpose of persisting without a goal seems kind of lost. So it's a two-part idea, this idea of persisting. Perhaps a story might help. I'm told that the professional PGA golfer, Kenny Perry, he's an Australian, he's coming to the end really of his PGA life as he hits his 40s, had a very successful golf career in Australia and in Europe, but when he joined the North American branch of the PGA Tour, his success seemed to disappear. And he's one of the people who went the longest on the tour before he had his first victory. He played in over 235 golf tournaments here before he had his first win. Now, that's a lot of golf tournaments to not have any success. And I think it illustrates the idea of persistence. Clearly, after loss 136, 137, he continued to have a focused determination to persist at golfing on the North American Tour. And he had a goal in mind that he was headed towards, which was a win. An example of persistence. Focused determination applied to an end or a goal, a particular purpose. So if that's how we understand persistence, then where do our problems with it come in? And I'll try really hard to be coherent here because I don't want to lose you. But if we have a two-part idea of persistence, then there are problems that can arise in either one or the other of the parts, or perhaps in both. So some of us perhaps struggle in persistence with the first half, that idea of focused determination. So we have a really good sense of where we want to go. I want to be on the stage, right? So we have a goal in mind that we're heading for. But what we struggle with is that determination that gets us through when times are tough or when the obstacles arise. And so little problems, bumps on the road, failures, big problems, they knock us off our goal because we don't persist. We lack that doggedness, that endurance, the perseverance part of persistence. So some of us might struggle in that half of the equation. The other half of the equation is we persist toward a means or an end. And perhaps some of us struggle in that, either lacking a sense of direction or a sense of purpose, or we persist in moving in a direction that is not healthy for us. So we persist in bad behaviors. We persist in holding grudges. Those things that we really, really have endurance and stamina for, we are really determined, but perhaps they're not things that are helping us move in a godly direction in our lives. And then some of us might really be lost, and we have neither the focused determination or the end goal in mind. And I somehow in my head get a picture of Matthew McConaughey in sort of his hippie idea of, whatever, wherever the world blows me, whatever tomorrow brings. I might try, I might not. So we're not going to talk too much about that problem because we only have 20 minutes. But I think that it's interesting to hear what God has to say to us about persistence, because it really applies to either of those halves of the equation. So let's start with the first one I talked about, which is this idea of someone who has a great vision of where they want to go, but lacks that endurance or that determination to stick with it. Because honestly, I think that this is perhaps the bigger problem, especially within church crowds, within the faith community, within God's body of believers. It's a bit of a thing that I've noticed with people, that we somehow have taken our faith and we start often to micro-interpret the things that are happening to us. As in, we sort of say, well, I should probably go in and do some visiting today, but if there's no parking spot available right in front of the building, I'm going to take that as a sign that God doesn't want me to go today. It's an extreme example. But if you listen carefully to people who really have a passion for something that God's laid on their heart, quite often when the troubles come, when the money doesn't come through on time, when the loan isn't there, when the resources aren't available when you need them, our first sort of fallback is to sort of say, well, maybe God really doesn't want me to do this after all. But if we take one small step back from that and just think for a moment about the scriptural stories we know about God's people who are set for us as examples in Scripture, and honestly, you could name just about any one of them: Abraham, David, Esther, Paul. Now, which one of them would write the biography that said, God put it all in place perfect for me and there were no challenges? Anyone? Think of the Apostle Paul, who had that incredible encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus and was given the task of ministering to the Gentiles, those outside of the Jewish community. He was beaten. He was thrown in jail many times. He's shipwrecked. He's mocked, he's humiliated, he's drummed out of town. But never once did he say, well, maybe God didn't really mean it. So if one of the things we struggle with in persistence, or if this is something that rings true for you today, I want you to know that if you're struggling toward a goal that you really think God has set in your life, that you are in good company. And that we need to be really cautious about turning off that path when the speed bumps come. Problems cannot always be interpreted as God saying no. I want to read for just a second out of Hebrews chapter 10.